They would like to see some sort of escalation that forces our hand and draws us directly into this war, because frankly, that is the only way that they would outright win.
Dog, what the f is she talking about, man? What is she even saying anymore? What are these words? What are these words coming out of her mouth? Breaking Points, which is a show hosted by Crystal, who recently got married to Kyle Kalinske. Mazel tov. Congratulations, Yahtzee. All the wishes in order and everything. And Seeger, right? I think his name's Seeger. Yeah, Sager. Discussed the Putin drone attack. The drone attack in Moscow that the Russians claim was an assassination attempt. If it was an assassination attempt, it was the shittiest assassination attempt in the world. I already expressed my opinions about it. If the Ukrainians did it, they didn't do it to assassinate Putin. Putin spends very little time in the Kremlin. Putin was not at the Kremlin at the time. It would have been much smarter to plan one of these attacks on, say, one of the compounds he actually spends times in, or when he was making a public appearance, even though those are very rare these days. And they probably would have done a little bit more than a dinky kind of like, remote control drone that had very little explosives on it that then just blew up next to a flag. What was the plan? Just fly it next to the Kremlin and just like hit the side of it and hope that you hit the correct window that he might be near at that specific point of time, that Putin might be like, oh, what's all the commotion? And he sticks his head out the window and it like hits him in the head, it breaks his neck. Like, well, I mean, it blew up next to like the flag on the Kremlin, on top of the Kremlin. It was a really shitty assassination attempt, if it was an assassination attempt, which makes me believe almost with like 99.9% certainty that it was an assassination attempt, no matter what it was. They wanted to talk about it, and they wanted to talk about how some people are saying that it was a false flag done by the Russians. Now, I've already expressed my beliefs about this. It's one of three scenarios. The first scenario is that it was done by the Ukrainians, that they organized it. They had some operatives in the country, working to do this in order to embarrass the Kremlin or to cause fear in the Kremlin, to basically let them know that they have, their hands everywhere. It's a propaganda victory. It was possibly done by, as the Ukrainian government alleges, Russian partisans. And I know that might sound wild, but I do know organizations like BOAK have engaged in saboteur efforts. Nothing this high profile. It's mostly like train derailments. But it's not impossible. Definitely want to talk about the equipment that's being used here, which is like, store-bought drones. These aren't Bayraktars, right? These are not like crazy, insane military drones that are impossible to get. These drones could probably be attained by any organization that really, wanted to go out and get them. Or was done by the Russian government in a false flag, which they have been caught multiple times during this war doing false flags, whether it is staging atrocities, which they have done, and we've talked about it on my second channel before, DylanBurnsLIVE, about them staging atrocities, or them pretending that the Ukrainians invaded them and making fake invasion videos of Ukraine invading Russia with armored vehicles that Ukraine doesn't even have at its disposal. And then it gets geolocated in occupied territory. Territory has been occupied since like 2015. So, that's not completely out of the possibility. Now, I hold some reservations about that possibility because I don't know why Vladimir Putin would want to be embarrassed this way unless he was going to use the moment to do like massive mobilization to be like, we have been attacked in the city of our forefathers. That hasn't happened. Maybe in the next 24 hours that will happen because, there's going to be the Victory Day parades. But then again, he is also not going to be at Victory Day parade in Moscow. He's going to be calling in, which seems to indicate that he might slightly be scared for his safety. So anyway, it could be any of those scenarios outside of the one scenario that I really just don't buy at all, which is that it was an attempt on his life, because none of the evidence seems to line up for that. Russia needs false flags, lol. I mean, Russia engages in false flags, so apparently they believe they need false flags. I don't think they need a false flag to do it, but if they can help like ratchet up domestic support for the war, they will do it. That's why they stage atrocities. That's why they've engaged in false flags before, and that's why they'll probably engage in false flags again. So do they need it technically to do that? No, but it probably would make it easier if they had something to point to be like, soy, this is why we need to send your 17-year-old to die. Soy. They need something to point to. Anyway, let's watch the Crystal and Sagar interview here about the drone strike in Ukraine. The drone, not in Ukraine, in Moscow. I know Vosh talked about it. That's how I found it. Even this existed. It just popped up in my feed. I don't even know if I'm going to disagree with them much, but people were recommending this to me, saying, Dylan, you're going to disagree with this. You should react to it. We want your opinion. So let's watch it.
Everybody, happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Crystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots to get to this morning. We have the latest fallout over that alleged strike on the Kremlin. We'll tell you what we know about all of that. We also have another bank that may be teetering on the brink of failure. This comes as the Fed hikes interest rates yet again, and we face down the debt ceiling deadline. So there's a lot going on in terms of the economy. We also have new details about.
By the way, I just saw somebody in stream chat just say Ukraine would never commit terrorism, right? Can I be honest? The same day they did that, Russia struck, like within 24 hours of that happening, a marketplace in Kherson killed 22 civilians as they were shopping for goods. A civilian target through and through. They were leveling apartment blocks full of people. I don't think a drone blowing up next to a flag, injuring and hurting anyone, is really deserving of any more outrage than those strikes, which deserve a million times more outrage, even if the news media is not going to cover them as much. And if that is considered an act of terrorism, then that strike on the Kherson marketplace is like 1,000 more 9/11s of importance than the fucking drone blowing up next to a flag and hurting nobody.
About exactly who Jeffrey Epstein was hanging out with and how often. Larry Summers, I have some questions for you. And a new effort by our friends over at Media Matters to paint wanting debates as being right-wing. You're going to love this one. You're going to love this one. Also excited to talk to you, Ben Smith, in the show. He has a new book out, and he's talking about, he was with BuzzFeed, how we can...
I want to say, once again, just thank you to everybody paying for the new lights. We just got some, just mean the world. So we love anybody comment for those very much, and I just step in the phase that we go to be able to expand. Yeah,
indeed.
All right, let's start off with Ukraine. So obviously, Emily and Ryan did a great job yesterday of talking about what was going on in this alleged attack on the Kremlin, potentially an assassination attempt. That's what the Russians are claiming. By the
I mean, like, potentially, if you're like, I don't know, if you have a single brain cell. Again, man, none of the evidence points towards that. None of the evidence points towards that. If you really believe it was an assassination attempt, then you have to believe that the Ukrainian SBU and the Ukrainian, well, it wouldn't even be the SBU, it'd be like the GUR, I believe, in this instance, that they didn't know that Putin wasn't at the Kremlin, and they wanted to attack the Kremlin even though he's never there, and that they decided that these two little dinky drones were going to be the best method, and just like randomly ramming them into the side of the building. And now, if that was an assassination attempt, Putin's going to be like 10 times more careful, as we're seeing him being. Even if it wasn't an assassination attempt, it was just like a PR stunt. The Russians could still get super scared about it and protect Putin 10 times more. And now he's not making an appearance at Victory Day, which would actually be probably a much better opportunity to probably assassinate the guy. Not making recommendations. I'm just, identifying that if you get into like the Hyatt building, like across the street, and you have a clear line. No, never mind. I'm just saying, like, it just doesn't make any sense. It just makes no sense whatsoever.
Ukrainian intelligence services on Vladimir Putin's life. Well, in terms of what we know about the both reaction by the Russians and then the initial denials by the Ukrainians, here's what we have so far. President Zelensky of Ukraine was actually in Finland when the attack happened, and he addressed the allegation on camera in English. Here's what he had to say.
We don't attack Putin or Moscow. We fight on our territory. We are defending our villages and cities. We don't have, enough weapon for this. That's why we don't use it anywhere. For us, that is the deficit. We can't spend it. And we didn't attack Putin.
I mean, this is not true. Like, they have done attacks in Russian territory before. But I mean, I'm not surprised that he's saying this, because even if they didn't do it, then he's going to say this because he's sticking with the company line of, we don't do that type of stuff, of course. And they didn't do it. If they did do it, then they're going to deny it because it was a Ukrainian intelligence operation. They're going to deny all the Ukrainian intelligence operations because they're engaged in a war for their survival, and they're not going to be like, yes, we brag about this 100%. We did it.
Putin, we leave it to tribunal.
Just gonna say, I would say it begs belief just because, and we'll get into this in a little bit about the way that they are specifically phrasing their denials. But I think it's also just worth, for anybody who's just joining us and hasn't seen the video, this is some crazy video in downtown Moscow. Let's go and put this up there on the screen. I mean, what we are watching here is this, this is the heart of power inside of Russia, and you can see a drone very clearly coming and striking the flag, which is on top of the domed building there. And actually, whenever
yeah, I mean, Putin goes up there to smoke all the time. That's why it was an assassination attempt. He likes to sit on top of the flag and look out at the city like he's the hunchback of Notre Dame.
there's some zoomed out photos and video of this crystal. You literally watch the drone fly past the Kremlin, the entire seat of power and all legitimacy of authority in Russia before exploding on top of the flag. The Russians claim that anti-aircraft was used to blow up other drones that were in the area. There's, again, the circumstances around all of this are unclear. I want to go back to, though, the initial denial now by the Ukrainian regime. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. And this was a screenshot that was flagged by our producer. Following the news, the actual chief of staff to President Zelensky actually posted 3 fire emojis on his Telegram channel without any commentary.
I'm sorry, I don't give a fuck. That's funny.
Deleted the post shortly afterwards.
Deleting the post is almost more of a tell.
Deleting the post is
more of a tell. I mean, who cares? Like, he posts it because it's funny. No matter what, it's funny. Here's all the reasons it's funny. If the Ukrainians did it, then the Russians got stunted on by the Ukrainians, and it's funny for that reasons. If the Ukrainians didn't do it, then the Ukrainians could believe it was either BOAK or an organization like that, and they humiliated the Kremlin. If the Russians did it, then it's still humiliating because no matter what, a drone blew up next to the flag and it makes the Russians look bad. No matter what, it's funny. And him posting fire emojis doesn't mean anything. Him deleting it probably means that they could see that 3 emoji post as an not even an endorsement, but like, hey, we did it. And so they went up to him and was like, yo, dog, to remove that, we didn't do it. Could be the one reason they took him down, or hey, we don't want them to know that we did it. That could be the other reason they made him take it down. Either way, they don't want him to put out comments like that, so they probably had him remove it for that reason.
It's a little bit of a tell, I would say. And the other reason that I think it's so important to think about all of this is that if you read the detailed response, not just by Zelensky, but by the chief foreign policy advisor to Ukraine, who actually put out
What? Did I just get a Melina raid? Did I just get a Melina raid right now? I got a Melina raid. Welcome, Melina raiders. Hello, all of you people. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Have fun? Okay, we'll have fun. Oh, gosh. I don't know if these people are ready for today's topics. We're talking about war and stuff. For all of you Melina raiders, all 1,800 and oh my Jesus fucking Christ. Wow, that's a lot of people. Jesus Christ. For all of you people, my name is Dylan Burns. I'm an amateur war journalist. I'm currently in the Kharkiv Oblast. I'm filming with demining crews around here. I'm following them, living with them, and documenting their experiences, interviewing them one-on-one, filming the process of demining explosives. I just got back from very close to the border with Russia, where I was interviewing soldiers who were fighting in Bakhmut. I was going to go to Kupiansk with artillery crews, but, they got bombed, so they had to call it off because, don't want to blow up. And so that's the type of work I'm doing. I'm trying to film those experiences, and I'm going to make them into short pieces and post them on my YouTube channel, DylanBurnsTV. And I also post unfiltered interviews, part of a series called Ukraine Uncensored on DylanBurnsTV. But I also do a lot of stream content. I stream every day from 6 p.m. to midnight from Ukraine, unless I'm back in the States for the brief periods of time that I'm back at the States. So welcome. I appreciate it. Welcome here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Also, if you're really cool, you can leave the gutter chat, which we call Twitch chat around here, you can go to my website, DylanBurns.tv, DylanBurns.tv, where you can see the wonderful site chat, which is on screen. Currently, we're about to watch a new segment, which was produced by Breaking Points, which is a segment on The Hill, I believe, done by Crystal Ball and Seeger over here, where they're talking about the drone attack on the Kremlin, and I was giving snarky commentary as a dumb Yankoid. So welcome. Thank you all for coming here.
A tweet in English. He said something which calls into question the entirety of the statement. He said, Crystal, we have never used drones or perpetrated any attack on Russian soil. That's why even pro-Russian or pro-Ukrainian accounts who I follow, people like Michael Weiss and others, are saying this is ridiculous. They're like, the idea that the Ukrainian intelligence services have not carried out both assassination campaigns and even air attacks on Russian soil is ludicrous. You know why it's ludicrous? We even know from the leaked set of Pentagon documents that they not only have done so, but want to do so with long-range weapons. So
I mean, the thing is, we don't know if every explosion was done by the Ukrainians, because again, there is anti-war partisan efforts that are going on in Russia. They're not as widespread as many people would have them believe. I know BOAC has been engaged in that type of activity. But I mean, it isn't that surprising that a military at war, fighting for its survival would not be like, yes, we did all of that. Yes, that was us. They don't want to give the Russians any information about their intelligence operations in their country. If it's them derailing the trains, or if it's BOAC derailing the trains, if it's them doing these car bombings, or if it's another organization doing these car bombings, they don't want to assist them at all. And I mean, it's a good narrative to stay within the country, within Ukraine. It's an easy narrative to throw out there. This isn't really a tell on whether or not Ukraine did this attack or not, because this is something they're going to say no matter what happens, whether the Russians did a false flag, whether the Russians did not do a false flag. That's something they're going to throw out every single time. It's going to be the same message, the same narrative. So I don't think this is a tell, really. But you can use it you can't say it's not true, but it's not a tell on whether the drone attack was them or was not them. No one has a right to commit terrorism. Again, I keep hearing this word used for this drone attack, and let's be clear. Let's get some footage of the drone attack again, because when people say it was terrorism, I just want us to all be clear what we're calling terrorism here, okay? Drone attack Kremlin. Do we have the, okay, here's the clip. That's it, right? Now, if that meets your barrier for terrorism, okay, that's up to you, okay? You can use that word if you want to, if you think that addresses the seriousness of the graphic, gore, violent content we just watched. But to be clear, within 24 hours of this happening, 22 Ukrainian civilians were killed in strikes on a marketplace in Kherson. A few days later, some of our boys in the emergency services, 6 of them were killed while they were doing demining efforts in the Kherson Oblast while they were doing emergency service work. Apartment blocks with civilians in them were struck in Kiev, not far away from my apartment in Kiev. They were doing attacks with Iranian provided Shahed drones on civilian buildings that actually hurt people. Didn't just, explode harmlessly next to a flag. And again, we don't even know it was done by the Ukrainians, right? Because if it was done by the Russians, then it's not a terrorist attack, then it's just a false flag. But I just want to put this in perspective here. I want to put this in perspective in the grand scheme of things, right? I mean, if we would have put this next to 9/11 and then used the same word to describe both, I don't know. I feel like we're applying too much serious here. If you want to use the word, that's fine. But in the grand scheme of things, this is getting 10 to 20 times more coverage than the attacks on Ukrainian civilians that actually ended up killing people. Anyway, you get the idea. You get my point. Even if you wanted to call it terrorism, which I can understand why someone could use this word to try to describe this, even if you were to use this word here, I feel like it overemphasizes exactly what happened here. Anyway, let's go back to this.
There's a lot, if you parse the language, you know, Zelensky, funnily enough, is saying, oh, well, we don't have the weapons. First of all, you have the weapons. Second, you actually want more, so you can do even more of this. And third, the idea that the Ukrainian intelligence services have not carried out multiple attacks on Russian soil throughout the course of this war is just a lie, absolutely on its face. Even the most pro-Ukrainian accounts will tell you that. Now, does any of this mean that they are directly responsible? Who knows? Is it a genuine who knows moment? Is it technically possible the Russians could have carried out a false flag? Maybe. I mean, let's think about it a little bit. But first, though, I think we should note that the people who are the most pro-Ukraine here in Washington all want to call it a first flag, because I think by saying that, they are implicitly acknowledging this is a dangerous escalation. One of those is the former CIA director, Leon Panetta. Here's what he had to say.
And former CIA director under President Obama, Leon Panetta. Secretary Panetta, sources tell CNN that U.S. officials had no warning that...
By the way, when we talk about like dangerous escalation, I'm really worried about these escalations. I am genuinely worried because, you know, if things get really bad and they really scare the Russian government, they might like invade Ukraine or something. And that would be really bad, man. That'd really suck.
An attack like this was coming and that the Ukrainians assure them privately they had nothing to do with it. What's your take?
Jake, this really does smell like a false flag operation on the part of the Russians, a diversion, if you will.
So, false flag.
Wait, that isn't an acknowledgement that it's a dangerous escalation. That's just him expressing that he believes it's a false flag. I mean, like, okay, if this is a dangerous escalation, what has been escalated? What's the new thing we're doing? Because if the argument is, will they try to assassinate Putin? Again, ridiculous. I don't think it was an assassination. If it was done by the Ukrainians, it was done for the symbolic purpose of, in the lead up to Victory Day, they're showing that they have the long arm of the GUR can reach all the way to the heart of the Kremlin. If the Ukrainians did it, whether through Russian partisans or through their own agents operating in the country, doesn't really matter. Same purpose, same message delivered. Not really an assassination attempt on Putin, but let's for a moment pretend it was, right? Let's for a moment pretend it was. And I don't think the Ukrainians even should be engaged in operations like that to do something like that to Putin. I think that their resources should be concentrated somewhere else. I don't think killing Putin would necessarily even end the war. I think the people that would replace him are pro-war maniacs, or people who would still want to see this war through, because he's surrounded himself with people of a similar ideological bent, mafia state mafiosos who are hell-bent on the imperial Russian nationalist goals that he has also bent himself on. But what are they going to do? Are they going to try to assassinate Zelensky? There's been a million reports about the Russians already trying to assassinate Zelensky at the start of the war. What are they going to do? What are they going to escalate to that the Russians aren't already doing in Ukraine? Are they going to kill civilians? Well, they're already doing that. Are they going to bomb civilian infrastructure? Well, they're already going to do that. Are they going to bomb, you know, the support services in Ukraine? Already did that. In fact, they tried to use that as a weapon of war, trying to knock out Ukraine's electricity. I was in Kharkiv when they were knocking out. I was actually like a mile and a half away from it. I had to like jump into like a ruined sports center to take cover as they were taking out the electricity for the city. What are they going to do? That's like the escalation. What is this going to escalate to? And the Russians haven't escalated since this has happened. I mean, they've been doing a lot of drone strikes and attacks on civilians, but nothing that they haven't done before. After any time they face a humiliation. So when we call it an escalation, is it a temporary escalation for where a few days they get really angry and they start shelling a bunch of places? Or is it a permanent escalation where they're going to do something totally different? Well, we now, from what we've seen publicly at least, haven't seen any permanent escalation unless something's going to be announced tomorrow morning when, you know, Victory Day parade happens, which Putin's going to be calling into because he's terrified of showing his face in public.
They said it's a diversion. I mean, again, look, anything is possible, but I think we should consider a couple of things. I'm curious what you think, Crystal.
Yeah.
Number one is this. It's humiliating to have a drone. It's like the Chinese balloon thing, but for the Russians. You have a nation that you are at war with that is able to penetrate your most innermost defenses and strike at the seat of power in Moscow. I mean, that's humiliating. That would be like if somebody, you know, blew up the statue on top of the Capitol building. That's insane.
Right.
Think about what that response would look like. And the
a good
questions
point.
it would call to the actual like command and control of the Russian regime.
Yeah.
Second, you know, okay.
I think that might be the purpose. The purpose is to show that they don't have a hold on the situation. If it is done by the Ukrainians, that would be the purpose, not the assassination. Not to assassinate Putin. The purpose would be to, make them come into question. Like, oh, how strong is Russian air defense? Is it strong enough to keep all of Russia under safe control of Russian air defense? I don't know, man.
Okay, everyone's saying it's a false flag and all that, but we also, again, as I've laid out, Ukrainian intelligence services have long both wanted the weapons to carry out attacks like this, have, justified this, and also are, very obviously gleeful, as we initially showed you in that. So I just think much of the false flag discourse is centered around the...
No, if the Chinese sent a drone to the White House and blew up the flag on the premises, people would be fucking pissed off. Well, of course people would be pissed off, but let's redraw the situation. So in this scenario, the United States has invaded China. They've invaded China and they're occupying like 1/10 to almost 2/10 of the country, right? And they have committed tons of massacres, filled up mass graves, targeted civilian infrastructure. They're saying that China isn't real. They're just Americans in denial, and they need to get in line. And if they don't get in line, it's only going to get worse for them, as we're trying to use refugees as a weapon of war and displace as many people as possible, right? And then China blows up a little dinky drone close to the White House while Biden's not there. That would be a more concrete comparison. Oh, and we don't even know for sure the Chinese did it, or if it was somebody else. There you go. There's your comparison.
A fact that here's the basic truth. Whatever you think, this is definitely ratcheting things up a notch.
Well, and whatever you think, it's definitely in the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, even the biggest Ukraine stands who want to believe Panetta that has all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation and a false flag, in the infamous words with used to dismiss the Hunter Biden laptop story. Even if you want to believe that, you have to acknowledge.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just feel like Crystal hasn't been paying that much attention to the war in Ukraine. Russia has engaged in multiple false flags at the start of the war in Ukraine and throughout the war in Ukraine. We've covered them on the channel before, as they've staged atrocities that have been exposed. And then after they were exposed, they delete all the videos and pretend they never posted them in the first place. They have staged a fake Ukrainian invasion of Russia that was then geolocated to be an occupied territory, as they were using armored vehicles that Ukraine doesn't even have access to. The false flags that they do aren't even that good. And when they counter factual information, like what happened in Bucha when the evidence was overwhelming, all they do is they just put fake over it. They just write the words fake, put it on Russian TV, say, look, it's fake. If you see this video, it's fake. And they say that to the Russian public. They engage in false flags and try to disprove truthful information, try to disregard it all the time in Russia. Do it all the time. They've done it a lot during this war. And so to just be like, oh, it's like the Hunter Biden story, I feel like this just comes from her being generally disconnected from the war and not paying that much attention to the specifics of, Russian propaganda.
The Ukrainians have done some crazy crap already, and they've done it on Russian soil. And you also have
They've done some crazy crap. Man, yeah, that would be my takeaway.
to acknowledge, the Russians are liars. So are the Ukrainians. I mean, we know this.
Okay.
And look, heat of battle, heat of war, I get it, okay? Maybe you can make some excuses for them, but you cannot rely on the word of Zelensky, whether or not anyone in the Ukrainian state, Ukrainian Rotary Club or whatever, had to do with this attack.
I mean, I can at least agree with that. Like, of course, Zelensky is the president of Ukraine. If they did engage in it, they're not going to admit to it. I can at least agree with that.
I think your point about, it's hard to imagine that this would be the type of false flag that they would want to stage, given that also throughout this war, it's really been Putin has really attempted to sort of protect the population from the fallout of the war and not make it feel like this is on their soil and this is coming for them directly.
I mean, I wouldn't. Okay, so this is, I think this just comes from her not paying too much attention to Russian propaganda. The narrative is that Ukraine wants to invade Russia and actually annex like other regions of Russia. There's been talks of they're coming for Belgorod, they're coming for you, they're going to make your kids trans and gay or whatever. The West is coming for you. There's going to be NATO bases in Moscow. That type of rhetoric has been extremely ramped up since the start of the war. I mean, absolutely ramped up. There's a difference though between them saying they want to come to you and they will come to you, but don't worry, we're here to stop them. That's the narrative. So I don't think it's completely out of the realm of possibility that they would take a drone, hurt no one, injure no one, and then have it just go dink next to the Kremlin and be like, oh my God, this is 9/11. Because no one died. Did anybody get hurt in the strike? Was everybody protected? I mean, nobody got hurt. So again, I don't think it's impossible. I do think it's the most unlikely scenario, but I'm not going to be so quick to dismiss it.
In order to try to maintain support for the war effort. So, you know, it flies in the face of that as well. But just think about it. I mean, we know of two very, very likely that Ukrainians were involved in two separate assassinations on Russian soil with pro-Russian war bloggers, effectively. We know that they, you know, were very likely involved in the Crimean Bridge. We still don't really know exactly what happened with Nord Stream. They may have been involved, it may have been U.S. on our own, et cetera, but it's not crazy to think that they were involved in blowing that up as well. We know from the leaked documents that they...
Well, then we do... Wait, okay. To be clear, what she's saying over and over is, we know that they might have been. Okay, then you don't know. We don't know this. Don't say you know and then proceed to say you don't know. I can't be like, we know that Steven Crowder might have possibly beaten his wife with an alligator. I mean, we know, like, I don't know that. I don't know that information. Maybe it's true. I mean, dude's said a lot of weird stuff towards his wife. You know, there's been a lot of weird conversations there. We've had some weird footage be released. We don't know that information though. Like, we don't know this. We don't know that. Don't say we know. Say, there's been a lot of speculation about this. There's been a lot of speculation about that. There's a lot of evidence towards this. That would be something you say, but don't say we know and then proceed to say you don't know, because that's what she's saying. She's saying we know and then proceeds to say we don't know.
They were very interested.
Oh, but the Kerch Bridge explosion 100% was the Ukrainians. 100%.
In obtaining long-range missiles from us so that they could strike further onto Russian soil. So to act like, oh, there's no way this could...
Okay, the long-range missiles is not... It probably would be used on Russian soil. I also think that it should be used on Russian soil. I don't know if that's a radical idea that if a country gets invaded, it can punch back. It's going to be necessary to undermine Russian supply lines into the country. And this is completely legal under the laws of war and international relations. But apparently, Russia's allowed to have their gloves off as they murder and slaughter and rape and pillage and loot through the countryside. But the Ukrainians need to put pillows on their fists as they try to resist any war that is existential to their existence as not only a nation, but also as a people. As a people. So, you know.
Be them, I think that is incredibly, incredibly naive.
Oh, also, some of the strikes would not be even in Russian territory. It would be internationally recognized Ukrainian territory, like the Kerch Bridge and deeper supply lines and for that, like, deeper in like Kherson, Zaporozhye territory.
I think it is willfully blind, and it frankly irritates me that the media is not more clear about these things, because you have so much of the population that they just see Zelensky as a hero and they just dismiss it out of hand. There's no way possible that he could have done this. Think about the incentive that they have.
I do think the people that completely dismiss it and say there's no way possible the Ukrainians could have done this, I do think that's silly. I do think that's silly. That's the one point of agreement I can put forward.
Have here too, which is something that we have always flagged as a real danger. It is in the Ukrainians' interest to have an escalation that would draw us directly into the conflict. So when we look at something like this and we're like, this is insane. You're trying to potentially assassinate the leader of a nuclear-armed superpower? Like, what in the world are you up to? But their calculus is very different. Their interests are not in this way actually aligned with us. They would like to see some sort of escalation that forces our hand and draws us directly into this war, because frankly, that is the only way that they would outright win.
Dog, what the fuck is she talking about, man? What is she even saying anymore? What are these words? What are these words coming out of her mouth? So the first thing is, she's like redoubling down on the assassination attempt. Again, if you think it's really even that possible, or at all likely whatsoever this was an assassination attempt, I think you're a schmuck. And I even said it about her on Twitter when she tweeted out like, oh, looks, could be an assassination attempt. Hook, line, sinker, man. Hook, line, sinker. Why would they, again, strike the Kremlin? Putin's not there. Putin's usually not even there. And how do they do it? They do it with 2 dinky drones that blow up near the flag. It doesn't make any sense. That's not how you. The only way Putin could have died is if he decided he was going to run on top of the building and literally jump in the direction of the drone. He could have literally been next to the flag and he probably still would have survived. Maybe with like his hair singed or maybe a few burns. He would have had to jump off the building onto the direction of the drone, have the drone blow up for him to then die. I mean, that part's just silly. As for the idea that this could be a motivation for them to drag us directly into the war, the United States, I have seen nothing from the Ukrainians that seems to indicate that they are doing that in a sustained effort, that they're trying to find different ways to get America directly fighting into the war. Of course, the closest I could even think of would be the close the skies thing over Ukraine, which he knew was never going to happen. Zelensky knew that wasn't going to happen. But there was no way Zelensky was not going to tell his people, I tried to make it so the Russians can't blow up your hospitals. I tried to make it so the Russians can't blow up your kindergartens, blow up your homes, kill your grandmas, kill all your family members, fill up the mass graves, bomb apartment blocks off the face of the earth. I tried, I asked. Of course he was going to do that. Of course he was going to do that. And I would expect any other world leader in his position to do the same. But I've seen no evidence that this strike or any of the other actions they've engaged in or the GRU has possibly engaged in, because again, we don't even know this was them, was meant to drag the United States into the war. And I don't understand how this would. How would this even drag the United States into the war? What's the game plan? Let's think about how the scenario goes. Okay. So a drone blows up next to a flag, and then America invades Russia. How does one come up to? How does that even work? Let's go with the theory that everything that's being alleged, the Ukrainians said they did it, right? Like Daria Dugina, I can buy that happened, that the Ukrainians did that. Let's say they blow up Daria Dugina. How does that drag America into the war? What happens? Well, Russia gets angry and they start bombing NATO bases. Do we really think Russia's going to be like, oh my God, Ukraine did a bombing in Russia. America's at fault. We're declaring war on America. If they can't even take Bakhmut after 9 to 10 months, a city of 70,000 people, just throwing in with human wave tactics, wave after wave after wave, you think they want to escalate the war more and add more soldiers fighting them that have better training, are more familiar with the equipment they're fighting with, and better supply lines, better intelligence apparatuses, a powerful air force that can actually close the skies over Ukraine? It doesn't make any sense. So what's the path here from drone attack to they're at war with the United States or America's dragged into the war? What's the path?
So that has always been there, but I just really want to urge people to think about how much fire we are playing with here. Because even if you submit there was like a 1% chance that this was the Ukrainians, you have to, these are our partners and allies. They did not warn us probably in advance that they were going to do this. We have no control over them. And
by the way, can we really blame them? No, because before I thought it was bad. And because I believe that more integration with intelligence between Ukraine and the United States is good. And from the reports I have read and from what I've been told, there seems to be situations where Ukraine will want to strike a position with HIMARS. They'll call the United States and they'll be like, we want to strike this position. And they're like, hold up for 2 minutes. And in 2 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes, they'll send them more accurate coordinates. The Ukrainians will be like, thanks, dog. Really appreciate it, sister. Click. And then they'll strike them with the more accurate coordinates provided by the United States intelligence apparatus. That is great coordination where we aren't pulling the trigger on anything, but we're certainly giving them the intelligence they can use to kill generals, to undermine logistics, blow up ammo depots. Fantastic, fantastic cooperation. That is great, but we also saw the Jax Textera leaks. And we saw that there was information about Ukrainian air defense, which could have possibly endangered lives. When you think about how many lives that Ukrainian air defense saves in the Kiev Oblast, where they're shooting down the Shahed drones. There is a possibility that Russia could have exploited it, definitely if it came out earlier, to try to target the different regions with the lowest amount of air defense and try to do a Zerg rush of missiles and strikes in order to overpower Ukrainian air defense and kill civilians. It was leaking information about casualty data. It was leaking information about a bunch of other stuff. And so Ukraine sees those leaks come out, and then Ukraine thinks, yeah, we're going to tell them about our military assassination attempts. Again, not an assassination attempt, but I'm entertaining this for a moment, that the United States wouldn't even approve of in the first place. Of course they're not going to tell us about this. I mean, if it was an assassination attempt, I don't believe it. I don't even think they should be doing it in the first place. I don't even think this was really that beneficial if the Ukrainians did it. Outside of a woohoo propaganda victory. Anyway, let's continue.
And we also know from the leaked documents and from a lot of other reporting, we have less insight in some ways into what the Ukrainians are up to because we don't have these deep intelligence networks that we've been working on for decades with regard to the Ukrainians, and they don't let us in on what they're up to. We have less insight into their operations in some ways than the Russians.
Yeah.
So we are playing with...
Could you imagine if the Jack's Hex terror leaks exposed Ukrainian invasion counteroffensive plans? If they shared that information with the United States and that information was made publicly available to that Discord freak, and he leaked it to the public, undermining all these plans that they had for the counteroffensive in the coming weeks and months? My God, man. Terrifying concept. I don't know, even if we did have access to it, that he would have had necessarily access to it, because I'm sure in those reports he didn't have access to literally everything we know, but it's a terrifying thought.
Fire. This is an insane situation, and it just reminds me again, whatever we can do to get this conflict to an end is incredibly critical.
This is the issue. You know, the NAFO people who are out there are always like, well, the Moscow has tried to assassinate Zelensky. Yeah, who's defending Moscow? Okay?
Right.
If the Ukraine, listen, here's my general take on the matter. People dismiss any concern of ours as some sort of condemnation on Ukraine. Now, here's the deal.
By the way, every time someone says we need to get this war to a close very quickly, like right now, the follow-up should always be, okay, what's your peace proposal? Okay, peacemaker. Okay, Miss Diplomat, Mr. Diplomat, you know, you two get together, we send these two before the international community. How are you going to draw the red lines that will divide communities and families for the next who knows how many 100 fucking years? It's like, these people will have freedom of expression. These people won't. These people will be able to see these family members. These people will be tortured to death in Russian prison. These people will get to keep their homes. These people will be deported once they reject Russian citizenship. These are the lines that are going to be drawn. And so it's not something that, so flippant, like, oh, at the end of the day, peace is the priority over everything. And of course, peace is good. We should all want peace, but it needs to be a just peace. It needs to be a just peace that the Ukrainians can live with. There's a reason why they want to keep fighting despite the death toll, despite the destruction. And it's because they want their own liberation. These are things that we see, for example, Algerians fought for the liberation against French colonialists. We saw the Vietnamese fight for the liberation. We've seen the Afghans fight for the liberation. We saw America fight for liberation. We saw so many countries fight for the liberation. And afterwards, we're always like, well, of course they won, because they had the will of the people and they kept fighting. They would never give in. But then we're in the throes of one of those types of struggles and we're like, God, why won't they just fucking give in?
If Ukraine wants to put itself in a position to risk its annihilation, they are free to do that. But then...
I'm dog. Come on, I don't even think that deserves words. What does that even mean? That just felt condescending. That just felt this just felt super condescending, man.
Then, should said risk happen, they should bear 100% of the risk and of the possibility without any of the escalation coming back on us.
Well, okay, what came back on us? What came back on us? Let's say that the Ukrainians did it. It was Zelensky. Zelensky snuck into Moscow and personally piloted the drone. He's like, I need to see if there's any Donetsk children on the throne of the Kremlin. And then he just... And he did that. What's been the backlash for the United States? What have we suffered as a result of this drone attack? Where is it? Where's the suffering? Where's the suffering? The only suffering I see is the Ukrainian civilians getting bombed. That he was, that's they want to face annihilation. Well, that's your condescending comment about it. The thousands of civilians getting killed in like drone strikes and shit, What's the backlash that we received? We received no backlash.
And that's part of why I'm so annoyed by the discourse around this.
Also, I don't think Crystal is in a position to say whether America would directly need to put boots on the ground in order for Ukraine to have a victory where they take back Crimea. I don't know her to be a super in-depth military analyst who can make those types of predictions, and we've underestimated the Ukrainians before. So at the very least, we should let them have their swing at it, right? At their own liberation.
This. Nobody's saying that Ukraine is, quote unquote, not justified or doesn't have the right to retaliate. You can do whatever you want, but whatever you want, you should keep us out of it. And that's the problem, which is that they don't seem to understand. We are tied at the hip. Not my choice, I can tell you that, but by the choice, though, of the President of the United States, of NATO, and the entire Western alliance, who seems to...
And the majority of Americans, which he disagrees with, but okay. I mean, that's always left out. It's always like, oh, NATO made this terrible decision. Oh, it was probably Biden who dragged us kicking and screaming as ordinary, strong, working, blue-collar Americans. But no, it's the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans support Ukraine. And that data has stayed consistent with the majority of Americans support Ukraine. The numbers ebb and flow, whether it's like 70%, 80% to 60%, or maybe even 55%. But there's never been a majority wants to stop sending aid. So this is also what the majority of Americans believe. Maybe that'll change in the future. I hope it doesn't. I think it would be silly if it did. And it could have disastrous consequences for the people of Ukraine. But the majority of Americans also support it.
Have lost their minds, and they seem to think that we are going to rise and fall with whatever happens to Ukraine. And if that's the case, then of course, as you said, Ukraine is of their fate, and what happens to them is now directly tied to us, and so we should have some say in the matter.
When you're dealing with nukes, what's going on here is tied to everyone on the planet.
Right.
I mean, even if we weren't so directly involved and basically proxy, fighters alongside of the Ukrainians with.
Wait, what? Wait, what? Wait.
What's going on here is tied to everyone on the planet.
Right.
I mean, even if we weren't so directly involved and basically proxy, fighters alongside of the Ukrainians with.
What does that mean? Proxy fighters alongside the Ukraine. Who's the proxy fighters? Is it like American soldiers on the ground? Proxy. What does it mean, proxy fighters? What is that even a comment about? Because, okay, if she was calling the Ukrainian military proxy fighters, again, I would say that's condescending. That removes their autonomy. This isn't like, oh, they've grabbed a bunch of prisoners and we forced the Ukrainians to do this. They're doing this on their own. But she said alongside, so I'm trying to figure out who is she talking about? She's talking about foreign volunteers? If she's talking about foreign volunteers, that's super silly because we're not involved in sending foreign volunteers. I've interviewed foreign volunteers. I've worked with these foreign volunteers. They're good people, but they did it all of their own fruition. And the American government is very clear to them that the American government will not come and save them. The American government is not responsible for them. And if they get killed, that's their fault. The American government is 100% clear about this. They are not encouraging people to go to Ukraine. In fact, I'm pretty sure the travel, if you go to the American government's website on traveling to countries, yeah, Ukraine is a big, I don't think it's a smart idea, chief.
By the way, some limited number of boots on the ground and providing a lot of intelligence to help them with their targeting and all of those things. And of course,
by the way, I think the number of American boots on the ground was 13 or 14. As in 13, 14 special operators in the entire country. And we don't even know what those special operators were engaged in. I know earlier in the war that we were told that there were special operators deployed at the embassy in case something happened and embassy staff had to be evacuated quickly. So it could be their embassy guards. And if that's the case, I couldn't care less. I could honestly not care less. And if they're training people, good. I think that's a good thing.
The money and the weapons and all that we have sent over there. Even if that wasn't the case, every single person on the planet should be concerned about what's going on here.
Sure.
Yeah, everybody should tell the Russians to leave. I mean, let's be clear. Is this just the strategy we're going to have moving forward? We're going to encourage in the world that you invade a country, you fail, and so then you just threaten to blow up the world, and so the world has to be like, okay, well, you have nukes, so We have to concede. Like when we were losing the war in Afghanistan, should we have just been like, we will glass Afghanistan. We will turn it into an irradiated wasteland and we will destroy the world if the Taliban does not surrender. And then the world goes to the Taliban. It's like, I'm sorry, you just have to. You just have to. It is what it is. Like America, you don't want to. Oh, Americans are pretty scary, man. But what if we did that in Vietnam? Or what if the Soviets did that in Afghanistan during their invasion of Afghanistan? It's silly. The last time something like that's even been seriously considered was Korea. And that was before all of the modern innovations and how these weapons can do 100 times more destruction than what they could do then. And the Soviets didn't even have nukes until the end of the Korean War, like 1953. So that mutually assured destruction wasn't even a thing yet when MacArthur was recommending it. And it still got rejected for that war. It still got rejected.
And then also, this is another important thing. And by the way, this is coming from Bellingcat, you know, which is definitely one of the more of a pro-Ukrainian group, I think is be fair to say. Put this up there on the screen. They are acknowledging that there are apparent Ukrainian attacks within Russia and Russian-controlled territory over the last 4 days, all using drones. There was a drone attack on a...
Wait. Who cares? Wait, what's this new how are we moving the goalpost here? It's now no longer, oh, the Ukrainians did an attack in Russia. Now it's the Ukrainians did an attack in Russian-controlled territory? You mean they fought in their own country? Okay, so it's now not, oh, it's an escalation for them to do attacks in Russia. Now it's an escalation for them to do attacks at all? They just can't shoot back? It is an escalation for the Ukrainian to like fire a gun vaguely in the direction of a Russian soldier in their village. That is too much of an escalation. All they can do is lie down.
A huge fuel storage facility in Crimea.
Yeah, that's Ukrainian territory. That's not an escalation. That's not. Why is this even being brought up? Well, who cares?
There was a drone attack on an oil depot near the Kerch Bridge.
Again, Ukrainian territory.
There was a
Wait, that might have been Russian territory. If it was over the Kerch Bridge, it's just as near the Kerch Bridge. But if it's in Crimea, then it's Ukrainian territory.
Major train derailments in a region inside of this territory, and they're also now...
Those two, we don't know for sure if that was the Ukrainians. That would just be, we're kind of doing a guessing game here. Could have been the Ukrainians. That is within Russian territory. Or it could have been like an organization like BOAK, which has engaged in train derailments before. And we know that partisans in Belarus have engaged in train derailments. But these train derailments seem to be strategically done to, you know, support a possible Ukrainian counteroffensive. So I'm more willing to believe that this could have been done by the Ukrainians.
Now was the drone attack at the Kremlin.
Why am I really supposed to be like, oh my God, the Ukrainians shot back in their own territory? Not just they shot back, period, anymore, and it hit Russia. But they shot back in their own territory. Why are we even talking about this post?
Lots of people kept saying, oh, well, this is an isolated incident. No, it was part of a concerted Ukrainian drone campaign against...
Wait, so this was the point? So the point was that they used drones? Yes, Ukraine used drones. I don't think that proves that it was part of a drone campaign. All this proves is that Ukraine has used drones in Russian-occupied territory, which of course they are. They're fighting a war in their country. Of course they're going to use drones in the territory of their own country, and that they've used drones in Russia before. But in those attacks, there's also something that's similar. They're all near Ukraine and all done to support Ukrainian offensive operations, targeting oil depots near the border, targeting supply lines near the border. There's something that I don't think it would be a part of that operation. If it was done by the Ukrainians, it probably would have been done separately from that operation for a totally different purpose, since it was against the Kremlin, not against targets that, you know, support offensive operations.
Against targets inside of Russia. Now, once again, they can do what they would like, but if they get retaliated against and they get a city wiped out or something like that, well, then that's on them. Because
he's so fucking stupid. I'm sorry, man. I can't. What, you know, there was a drone that we don't know that they could have done, they could have not done, it could have been them, it could have not been them, and it blew up next to a flag. So if a city gets wiped out with, you know, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million dead, oopsie daisy, oopsie doopsie, oopsie doopsie. What? This is fucking insane.
Because that's
It's not on them. That would be a war crime. That would be illegal. That would be horrible. Dude, like one little dinky little drone goes boop, and he's like, millions dead. It is what it is, dog. Your fault. What's wrong with you?
That's what war looks like. And then the idea that we should get drawn into it even more, which is what a lot of people here in Washington want, I think is very problematic.
Yes.
I just, you know, for me, the fact that so many people want...
We should, by the way, we should support more. That's my position. We should support more. We should send more aid. We should send more ammunition. We should do more to support Ukraine. We should. The longer we wait to send more aid, the longer the war is going to take. And if they lose, then we're talking about splitting, we're carving up a country like they did like colonialists did in Africa, where we're just going to be drawing borders to serve the interests of two rival global superpowers, not the interests of the locals, causing instability for decades to come, and possibly even building the groundwork for a future Russian invasion in the future.
I call it a false flag, is the tell in and of itself, because because by doing that they can push responsibility off the Ukrainians, because if we all acknowledge that look, let's just say it's probably almost certainly it was the Ukrainian regime.
Dude, shut the fuck. The regime, dog, is this like on the hill? No, it's on their like separate thing. The regime. Dog, he just sound, dude. He's just starting to sound like Soloniev, man. The Ukraino Nazis led by those homosexual trans, like he just fucking sounds like Russian state media. The regime? What the fuck is this? Dog, Crystal's not batting an eye.
Well, then they have to
Actually, she batted her eye twice there.
acknowledge then that they've done something incredibly risky.
I also want you to think about, you know, with Panetta there on with Jake Tapper. Now, if you ever had anyone with a critical view, as we do, or a skeptical view, as we do, go on and say, you know, this really looks like a Ukrainian attack, oh, they'd be up in arms.
Oh, they'd be
There's
freaking
no
out.
way you could just say that without Tapper jumping in and press.
Yes.
Which, you know what? He should, right?
Sure.
But you got to do it on the other side, too. And Panetta's just allowed to float this with no backing, no evidence, no nothing, just because he wants it to be true. And
Dog, after he's just like, it's probably the Ukraine, probably them. It's probably, yeah, it's almost certainly the Ukrainian regime led by that Zelensky bastard dictator. Might as well just be might as well fully commit at this point. And then right after him saying that, you cannot do a spiel about like, man, they're saying it with such certainty. What? Come on, don't what's the phrase? What's the turn of phrase? Don't throw stones at glass houses.
no pushback from the media. This becomes the accepted narrative. Also, to linger on that tweet that we put up earlier showing the various drone attacks in and around Russia from Ukrainians, that also really undermines Zelensky's claim that, oh, we don't even have the weapons to do this.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So if your statement of denial really doesn't hold up to scrutiny, that should cause people to have a lot of question marks about what else you're presenting here and whether it is in fact accurate or not. Again, let me just say, if you are more inclined than we are to believe Zelensky's denials and believe this was a potential false flag, please acknowledge there is at least a chance that this was the Ukrainians, and if there's even a chance that they are freelancing and engaging in this type of incredibly reckless actions, that should change your whole way that you're thinking about this war.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey guys,
Reckless, the regime.